Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. It's Fran here, and I'll be guiding you through my kind of round of 16 thought process in terms of team selection. I think the first thing I'd like to do is kind of run you through the spreadsheet that I've created in terms of how I've kind of mapped the days of play together and why I've kind of factored in players as best choices, differentials at times, and safer picks. For me, safer picks are usually just center backs because I think the best choices for defense is are usually just fullbacks who have attacking returns, and given the kind of state of international football, I think you see a lot more potential for attacking fullbacks to actually create and have a larger influence on the game. And very often, I think we do miss out on clean sheets, with the exception to a few teams in the tournament that have shown a lot of defensive prowess and kind of structure and solidity within their play. That being sort of a bedrock of their structure. I think teams like Italy and England follow into that mold, whereas this isn't exactly the same for I think many other teams. Now, I think what's worth noticing, of course, is that you actually have a 105 million budget, right? So I have a 106.7 million budget, so it's a little bit unfair in this sense. I think perhaps some people might have a higher budget, some people might have a lower budget. That really depends on what has happened. I think over the course of your last three match days, it's likely you have something similar to me, and I think I'll be creating a rough kind of team selection based on these kind of picks that I've created here as well. And I think the purpose of this guide is more for people who have no chips remaining. So the idea is we're trying to play our chips as safe as possible in terms of how we pick a team. We want teams to at least progress, hopefully, into the round of eight, but really with the mind of those teams potentially progressing to the round of four. The reason being because without the wild card chip remaining, if you use it last week as an example, you would only have three transfers after the round of 16. And of course, the round of 16 is a huge point in the game where we lose a lot of players across many different teams, and a lot of upsets will naturally happen. So it's a tricky stage to, I think, get through. This is going to be the hardest part in terms of future planning as well. Now, let's look at the playoff bracket. In my opinion, I think the playoff bracket is extremely tough. We have a lot of big matchups already early on, and I think a lot of even matchups early. What I would consider rather even matchups would be Belgium and Portugal, Croatia versus Spain, England versus Germany, Wales versus Denmark as key examples. I think the teams that have the best chances of having a great game within the round of 16 are Italy, France, Sweden, the Netherlands, and that's it really. I think the rest of the games are up for debate. But when you go into the round of eight, you begin to see a very tough game. So, for example, up on the top side of the bracket, Belgium and Italy, they have a tough game there. France will likely have a tough game versus the winner of Croatia versus Spain. The winner of England Germany, I think, actually has an easy game in a sense versus the winner of Sweden versus Ukraine, and the Netherlands versus Czech Republic. I think because Netherlands is going to win this game, I think they will have a relatively easier time versus one of Wales versus Denmark. But I do think Denmark is a potential dark horse, and we know that they've had great international performances. If you watch the World Cup in, the last time we saw Denmark, they actually drew versus both finalists and were knocked out by one of the finalists in Croatia. So they're not a bad team whatsoever, and I think they've shown to pick up form at the end of the tournament, of course, given the kind of circumstances of play for them. And we saw quite an admirable game from Russia, and they can definitely take that confidence onwards. But I think Netherlands is also building a lot of momentum themselves. But let's go back to the days of play and kind of address the players, in my opinion. I think on the first day you have two great match days in the sense that I think Denmark probably has a good chance to have attacking returns versus Wales, and there's also potential differentials there. So I think Mala is one of the most offensive kind of fullbacks in the tournament, and you can see his attacking dividends paying off in the Russia game where he scored a goal. Now, of course, Denmark hasn't necessarily kept a clean sheet in any of the games, but I think part of that process is because of the fact that on match day three they really had to fight for their tournament lives, and they probably played a little bit more attacking than they would have liked to. And simply, I would scrap in a sense the effect of match day one, and also put down match day two to simply Kevin De Bruyne's brilliance. I think people are kind of underestimating the defensive potential of Denmark, and I think teams that have shown to kind of have great structure, have in a sense stopped Wales, I think, from creative attack. So, for example, if you look at match day one, Wales struggled, I think, versus Switzerland with a different structure. But then when they were actually playing versus a weakened Italian side, they still struggled, in my opinion, to build effective chances as well, with exception to some set pieces. And I think Bale and Wales also were playing in a somewhat negative manner as well to ensure that they would progress. So that is a little bit of a qualifying factor. But I do think Wales have a very kind of set style of play in terms of Bale dropping slightly deeper now towards the right and kind of looking to distribute the ball diagonally to one of Dan James or Ramsey. And I think the plays are somewhat predictable in a sense for a more structured team. And I think Denmark is that actually team. Now, Italy, of course, we know are one of the greatest defensive teams in the tournament so far. And I think Spinazzola and Donnarumma, therefore, are great assets. And we know within Berardi, Insigne, and Immobile, you have that kind of Italian trident. I thought in match day 3, they had the opportunity to actually play different attacking players. And with the exception of Verratti, I don't foresee any sort of changes in the Italian lineup. So in my opinion, those are the picks. Now, of course, we have to look at the lineups on day 1, and we have the opportunity to do so. So, of course, do keep in mind of that. I think with Denmark, my expectation is that they actually will beat Wales. And for that reason, I think you want to look at kind of potential differentials from the Denmark team outside of Mela. I think Denmark have actually shown to have a solid attacking potential, and I think Højbjerg actually, despite his role in Tottenham, actually is playing in a much more aggressive fashion for Denmark. He actually plays more offensively than his counterpart in Delaney, and he has bagged 3 assists so far in this tournament and been, the man of the match for at least 2 of Denmark's games in terms of looking at Denmark's team. And I think Damsgaard, of course, is a player who has shown a lot of attacking threat. He gave us glimpses of that versus Belgium and continued that versus Russia. And I expect him to really shine versus a Welsh side, in my opinion, that has still kind of allowed teams to build chances for them, even a weakened Italy side, I think, where Verratti was stringing things along very nicely. Now, moving on to day 2, you have Netherlands versus Czech Republic. What's interesting about this game is that I think Netherlands have the strongest kind of run into the round of 4, in my opinion, if they win this game versus the Czech Republic, as we kind of looked in the playoff bracket. They have to play the winner of Wales versus Denmark. I think Denmark will be the tougher opponent for them. But this gives me a lot of hope in terms of making sure that you kind of set and forget, in a sense, 3 Netherlands players. I think Depay, Wijnaldum, and Dumfries are the no-nonsense picks. But I think Malen has potential as well. I think he's a glued-on starter in the sense that he's a 6 mil kind of budget forward, and he allows you to also to go for more premium midfielders if that's something that you actually would rather go for. And in my opinion, Malen is a very reasonable pick. I wouldn't really go for anyone else. I think De Ligt has been kind of touted, but simply put, I think Dumfries' attacking potential can't be understated, and I think he makes the absolute most sense in terms of a Netherlands defender. Now, moving on to Belgium versus Portugal, I think there's actually a strong potential here for this game to either be a low-scoring affair or a very high-scoring affair. The reason being because I think Belgium are extremely reliant on Kevin De Bruyne's kind of attacking prowess, and Portugal don't have a great transition from, I think, defense to attack, with exception to the way they build through the right with Semedo and Bernardo Silva. Portugal is actually going to miss out on Semedo, and I think potentially Pepe is also injured. And that creates a lot of havoc in terms of how Portugal effectively build their attacks on the right-hand side. I think it's the right option to actually drop Bruno in the team, but it also shows that they have limited kind of ways of breaking through defenses. And with Portugal getting the right side hampered, I think this gives a lot of potential actually for someone like Torgan Hazard to have a great game, playing kind of the left inside forward position that he kind of plays for Belgium as well. And I kind of like his interplays with Carrasco, and I think that makes him an interesting differential. Now, of course, there are 2 premium players here that have performed, I think, all tournament long in terms of Lukaku and Cristiano Ronaldo. And simply put, their kind of effect on teams can't be understated. I think the Belgium center of defense are somewhat poor and can easily be turned, and there's a potential for penalties there. But I think I do potentially see the same on the right-hand side of Portugal. Diogo Dalot is probably going to have to play on the right-hand side alongside Jose Font if Pepe is not allowed to play. And those are 2 players who have played, for Portugal before, more so Jose Font and less so Diogo Dalot. But I think this is a potential for Belgium to really attack, and for me, I would prefer getting those kind of Belgian assets, despite the kind of wonderful form that Cristiano Ronaldo has been in. But simply put, Cristiano Ronaldo is someone who you can't underestimate, and there's no other reason for me to say that he's nothing but a best choice. In day three, I think there's very interesting potential for differentials in Croatia versus Spain. I think Croatia have actually historically played Spain in the Euro Cup, and funnily enough, Perisic was the one to knock Spain out. And what we've seen from Modric, I think in match day three was a much more advanced position for Croatia, and that actually allowed him to net goals as well as create things for the team. And him being the set piece taker, a penalty taker as well, makes him a very interesting pick if you do believe that the Spanish defense can be penetrated. And for that same reason, I think those two Croatia picks are absolutely kind of the only options that you should really go for in terms of Croatia. There's also the potential for Vlasic, but I think simply put, Perisic and Modric are a tier above in terms of a differential pick. And I think when it comes to the big game, these are the two people that Croatia simply rely on, and these two players have also stepped up in the past. I think there's a differential there in Spain where Gerard Moreno has actually started to seal a starting spot across one of the three attacking positions for the Spanish national team. And I think his creativity, in a sense, and his work rate early on in the first half is something that Luis Enrique really enjoys. And his price at 6.5 or roughly 6.6 is very good as a budget forward, I think, as I say, if you want to kind of look into premium midfielders. And for that reason, I think Gerard Moreno is quite an interesting pick. He is, of course, likely not going to take penalties, but it's an iffy situation with Spain as well because they don't have a glued-on penalty taker. They've missed the last two penalties, and it's a tricky situation. For me, the best choices in Spain are undoubtedly Alba and Unai Simon. I think Spain do have a strong potential to actually keep a clean sheet here, which makes Unai Simon quite interesting. What makes Unai Simon somewhat difficult to kind of choose going forwards is the fact that they probably have to play France in the next game, which means it's very tricky to actually go for, I think, a double Spanish defense, especially if you think that they'll be penetrated even after they play versus Croatia, because they have to play France. However, I would keep Alba because he has fantastic attacking returns, in my opinion. Keepers in the round of 16 onwards are going to be very hard to pick. Even the best defenses, I think, will start to struggle here. And for that reason, I think you want to trust in teams that have already kind of exhibited a good defense and have at least the potential of bagging one clean sheet, because I don't think keepers are so easy to pick at this stage in the tournament. Laporte, for me, is a safer pick. He's simply just a centre-back that I think starts no matter what for Spain. We saw Pau Torres get rotated, and for that reason, I think Laporte is glued on. Now, here, of course, there's a big dilemma in terms of the French national team. I think Pogba is a clear differential pick for the midfield, given the fact that he is still playing from deep, but I mean, his fantastic vision, as we've seen within the last 3 days, match days rather, has kind of shown him to be, a clear differential pick, but he is still priced, I think, correctly, and that's the problem with Pogba. I think he is good to kind of bag you assists, but not necessarily anything more. And I think Benzema has started to find some form in the tournament, and him and Mbappe are the ones who actually get into the more attacking positions. Before, let's say, France has to kind of claw back from a lead. I think when France are actually allowed to build on an opponent who's parking the bus, then Griezmann becomes a much more attractive option. But I think Switzerland will actually look to attack France because, simply put, I think Switzerland don't have any other options. Their only kind of method of attacking teams is through pressing and then kind of creating interchanges with Mbolo, Seferovic, and even Shaqiri at times if he finds form. But I think Benzema and Mbappe are likely to be the better options, in my opinion, for this match day, given the way that Switzerland play. Now, looking at the French defender, I think any French defender is going to be a best choice in the sense that, with the exception of Digne, who's obviously just gotten injured, I think most French defender picks are very reasonable. You might have to watch out for Koundé and Pavard and what the rotation is there. So obviously I would pick from, the centre-backs or Lucas Hernandez. Now moving on to day 4, England versus Germany. This is a clear differential game for me because I think it has the potential to go both ways. Now, of course, historically, Germany have a fantastic advantage versus England, but that really means nothing in terms of international football, right? I mean, upsets happen all the time, and England have a strong team, and I think Germany come into this day with expectations dialed a lot further down. As I mentioned in kind of our tactical analysis video of the Portugal versus Germany game, I think Portugal played very much into Germany's hands, playing two, very slow defensive midfielders, playing into someone like Kimmich who can actually lob the ball past them, and then having kind of two kind of cams almost or right wingers defending alongside Semedo versus a very strong winger and left wing back in Gosens. And for that reason, I think Portugal completely failed with their defensive scheme and their tactical scheme too. And I don't think we'll see the same with England. England have shown to be a fantastic side in the tournament. If you look at France as kind of like a model for how to beat Germany, simply put, France have very strong fullbacks. And I think England have this and a very strong defense as well at this point in time. And for me, that gives me a lot of confidence in terms of England potentially getting a clean sheet. Now, of course, I think Germany have also started to build on their kind of five back formation. They're starting to get a little bit more of gelling between players like Kimmich and Gosens and trying to get this midfield partnership of Kroos and Gundogan to work. And we've also seen kind of Goretzka feature in the side, and he might even be rotated over Gundogan as an example. For me, what's interesting, I think, is that they are quite reliant on Muller. And if Muller is not allowed to play due to fitness, then that actually hampers Germany's chances very, very much so. But right now, the focal point in terms of the Germany attack is clearly Havertz, and I think, therefore, he's a great differential pick. I think for England, their kind of attacking differentials are going to be Sterling and Saka. The reason why they're differentials for me is because England have shown a little bit of a tendency to not push, I think, the issue as much in this tournament. They like setting deep with the two defensive midfielders, and they like to create plays with their kind of attacking four right now in the 4-2-3-1 structure that they showcased in their last match day, because I think Mount won't be able to play. So in my opinion, they'll play in that setup, and there's a bit more attacking potential there. So I think you want to pick one between Sterling and Saka, or potentially even Grealish actually as well. So I could add that in there. However, I think there's actually a very good pick in terms of the Sweden versus Ukraine game. I think Austria showed that I think a structured defensive side really puts a lot of dampeners into Ukraine's attacking game plan. And Ukraine is very much reliant, in my opinion, in terms of individual efforts, and as well as their kind of build-up from the right-hand side with Yarmolenko and Malinovsky. I think Sweden have shown a fantastic defense over the course of the tournament, and also have started to pick up some sort of shooting form. And a lot of this comes down to the fact that Forsberg has returned from injury and is showing very good form. Olsen, therefore, also is a very interesting kind of goalkeeping pick for me. The only problem, of course, is he might have to face the winner of England versus Germany in the next sort of set of games. In my opinion as well, I think there aren't too many picks in this match day. It's likely that you'll probably pick the bulk of your team and players in days 1, 2, and 3, and that's not necessarily a problem, right? We've seen so far that it's very risky to kind of wait and get a captaincy return on day 4. So for me, unless your day 4 pick is Cristiano Ronaldo, of course. But I mean, simply put, I think it makes the most sense to kind of stack most of your team within the first 3 days, because I think there are better games in those days, particularly days 1 and 2, and also the kind of French game, given the fact that I think Croatia versus Spain it can go either way. But let's go back to kind of my team, and I'll kind of conclude on what I've created so far. This is just my initial draft selection, so some picks are about to change. I'm definitely also not going to captain Jordi Alba to start off with, but here's an initial selection. It's going to be Benzema, Immobile, Depay. I think these are all 3 premium players in the tournament, and for me, the reason why I like them is because they're all penalty takers. Wijnaldum, Kevin De Bruyne, Forsberg, Berardi. With the exception of Berardi, I think the first 3 mids are the focal points of their team's midfield, and Højbjerg as well, even, to be fair. Berardi becomes one of those kind of second of the attacking trident. In my opinion, I think he kind of falls a little bit below Insigne in terms of touches on the ball and kind of creation. And I think, as we've seen, that kind of starting 11 for Italy has a very, very strong left side, built off the back of Spinazzola's attacking plays and Insigne moving into like a left inside forward position. But moving on to the defense, I think I like Alba and Mela. These are both 2 fullbacks who are extremely attacking. Same with Dumfries as well. These are all players that we've seen in the box, cutting back key chances, even finding themselves, open with a net or having scoring opportunities. And I think for the most part, these players will have the greatest chances within their kind of first round of 16 game, and I think they're great picks for that reason. I might also look to kind of change my keepers, but right now, I didn't really want to make sure that I was too hedged onto a team that I wasn't so sure about in the round of 8. For that reason, I picked Pickford, I think, for now, and Unai Simon. I might switch away from playing two Spanish players because I do think actually Croatia have a great potential to upset, but that's my pick for now. Spinazzola, of course, as we've discussed, is a fantastic player playing the left back position for Italy. I think simply put, Italy attack very much to the left and then play kind of off the ball through the right, and it's very interesting in that sense. And as I mentioned, Kimpembe for me is the cheapest French defender, and I think France can easily keep a clean sheet versus Switzerland. Uh, watching kind of Italy play versus Switzerland, I thought that when Switzerland played versus a well-oiled side, that they really struggled, and for that reason, I think I will be going with Kimpembe. But anyways, this is kind of my initial thoughts on fantasy so far in the round of 16 and kind of building up a team. Let me know what you think, and if you have any kind of comments on team selection or any kind of questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. Please also like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.